welcome to Literary Prospects, where we talk to authors and literary professionals about books, publishing, and the writing life. I'm Kelley Vick. I'm the host of the program, and in just a moment, it will be my pleasure to introduce today's guest. But first, a reminder that if you like what you hear, please do take a moment to subscribe. It helps us out, and you can make sure you never miss an episode. Also, we've opened a Literary Prospects shop, so if you're looking for bookish shirts, totes, and gifts, please check that out at literaryprospects.etsy.com. And to grab books featured on the podcast and check out more curated book lists, you can visit the Literary Prospects bookstore on bookshop.org. We'll leave all those links below in the show notes. And now, let's introduce today's guest. Sean Scott is a former art gallery owner, musician, and author. He previously owned the art gallery Arte Urbano in Madrid, where he celebrated diverse forms of visual art. His journey in music continues as he collaborates with business partner Mikey Basie on hookshot projects like the track Magic, created alongside the legendary Sly and Robbie. Beyond music, Sean occasionally writes poetry and has recently completed his first book, TeleKid Begins. Last but certainly not least, fatherhood plays a pivotal role in his life. Sean Scott, thank you so much for being here, and congratulations on writing and developing your first book, the cinematic superhero novel TeleKid Begins. I know you've decided to do independent publishing for this book, and I am very excited to talk with you about that. But first, I'd like to talk about the story. So what can you tell us about TeleKid Begins? How would you describe the book?
Hi, Kelley. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate the invite. So TeleKid Begins is a story of discovery, courage, and the magic that really lies within all of us. The book follows the journey of Brooklyn, an extraordinary boy with a secret power, and that power is that he could teleport. Brooklyn's remarkable ability opens up a realm of endless possibilities for him. While he's really learning to harness this gift that he has, he faces thrilling challenges, encounter formidable foes, and really explores a world far beyond his imagination. And that's, in a nutshell, what the book is about.
What was the spark that started this one for you?
Well, the spark started COVID. Me and my kid, we used to go to a park, just us alone, no one was there. And on one of the trips, we were discussing about summer camps, techie camps. And he wanted to do the one that will teach him how to make video games. And he wanted really to learn how to do a video game. And I mentioned to him that, if you're going to develop a video game, you need a story first. So you have a trajectory of how your video game is going to go. And we started to pen down, the characters within this story and what the main character would do. And he said, I wanted my character to teleport. And from that, I was like, okay, that sounds interesting. And when I got home, I was thinking about his story, and because he wanted me to help him write the story, I kind of segued into, why don't I write him a book about a kid that could teleport without his knowledge? And I decided to, dive into headfirst into a very shallow pool of the writing world to see if I could do it. Write a couple of chapters, see where that went. I did that. I emailed it to a buddy of mine that I work with, Mikey Basie. We work together at Hookshop on the music side. And he thought, these 2 chapters are good. Keep at it. And I continued. And once I got to pretty far into the project, I emailed that to a very close friend of mine, Lazar Lee, pardon me. She'll kill me that I butchered her name. She's at Sony Pictures. And she read it, gave me some really good pointers. I went back to the drawing board and revised from there. And that's how the book was birthed.
At what point did you realize that this was more of a universal story? You were writing it just for your son. When did you really know, all right, this is going to be maybe I'm going to need more copies here?
That's a very good question. That moment was, when I got the book and when I was finished, I forwarded it to friends with kids, say, have them read this and give me some feedback. And for the people that I sent it to, they text back immediately. My kid loves this. They want to know when the next one is coming out. Wow, did you write this? That kind of feedback. And once I realized that the, boys, girls had a really favorable response to it, was when I said to myself, it might be something that I could get a wider audience to. And that's what everyone was saying to me. I told them I wrote this for Brooklyn. I just want you guys to give me some feedback prior. And once I got that feedback, I just started to investigate how, where, and when I could, not only get this out there, but what are the channels that are available for distributing a book? Start doing the homework on that. How do you do that? Who are the people you speak to? And that took a bit of homework of doing your own investigation, looking at interviews of other writers, the challenges that they went through, the people who they speak with, looking at the back of books to see who published the books and reach out to them. And that essentially is how I figured that this might be something for mass consumption.
And then you decided to go the independent publishing route. Can you talk a little bit about what led to that decision,
Absolutely.
how that's working?
So the independent publishing route, what I realized in my investigation is that there are a couple or a few ways that you could get your product out there. The first, obviously, is getting a publisher who sees your vision, they align with your vision and want to give you the ability to get that out there. They're almost a plug and play. They know everyone who distributes. They could put, all the powers of their organization behind your book to get you out there on interviews and so forth. I reached out to publishers and the response was zero, crickets. So the next best option was independent. What does that look like? Is it uploading to Amazon your book, having them store the book, and from soup to nuts, once someone sees it, purchases it, they ship it out, and you kind of rid yourself of all that in-between work because they have, they're vertically aligned in terms of how they do things. But there's a huge cost that comes with that. And I decided to try and do this on my own and leaving kind of Amazon as another choice that I could come back to. So let's try to go fully independent with this. So what that means is that I had to find a website developer. And how I did that was, I called my sister, who is very creative also, and she recommended a guy, Ali Ozcan, who's out of Canada, of AEO Creatives, very wonderful guy who, really works with you leads you through if you want to monetize your product, the things you need. So that was pretty interesting process to go through. And then, I went on Fiverr to find someone who could format books for
Mm.
print layout. And if I wanted to get on Kindle, and found a guy, Walt, who did thousands of art books and books for print, like of noted people. And I was like, that's my guy.
Mhm.
And after having a conversation with Walt, he introduced me to Angie, Alaya, who helped me design the cover for print and also for Kindle. So once I was able to get in touch with those people, work out what the costing of that was, then I was able to, figure out on my spreadsheet, what is the cost of this, what it's going to look like, and, make that decision on going fully independent. And part of that, subsequently ran into making ads for social media. So I found a lovely lady who lives in New Jersey, Christy Carlo, who does like these social media selfie sites, selfie style ads.
Mm-hmm.
And I chose her because from just kind of doing my homework on who's going to be the target audience, which is kids, but their parents are going to be purchasing the product. She
Mm-hmm.
fit that role as a mom. She just looked like a mom, her talking voice, the whole thing. So I hired her to do my social media ads. So that was kind of the process that I went through in terms of figuring out whether I would go a publishing route, which was a not, was, Tyson punching me in the face,
Mm-hmm.
no responses. And then just figuring out the other side of it. So, the independent route is obviously a story still in the making. So hopefully at another juncture, I would have a success story to kind of come back and tell you the pitfalls of what to look up for and the challenges. I think a lot of stories that I was able to follow are the ones that really talk about the challenges. It's nice when people talk about the successes, but people rarely, I should say, talk about the challenges.
Yeah.
And I think that's what people, in my opinion, let me speak for myself, is what I want to learn about. What are these challenges that I'm not privy to? And what are the different ways to overcome these challenges? And who can help me to go overcome these challenges? That's how I kind of look at this task, this journey that I'm on, meaning
Yeah,
independent.
absolutely. And the challenge is that is the thing. And you don't know what you don't know, right? Starting out, it's
You don't
just
know.
figuring out what questions to even ask as you're going through.
So if I take it a bit further, like after I wrote the book, then came the task of, well, I want some illustrations in the book.
And the illustrations are beautiful.
And how do I find someone to do that work?
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't know, as you said, you don't know, it's very expensive to get illustrators that meet a certain standard that you are going like, okay, this is what I want. And I had tons of people sending portfolios and, what it would cost. And I was like, wow, this is crazy. So I remember when I lived in Gramercy years ago, I used to walk over to the School of Visual Arts in New York City. It's a private profit school,
Mm-hmm.
and they have a bulletin board. And years ago, I had someone design a cover for an album, and I did it through that school. So I realized that that was now upgraded to a digital site where you could go on a bulletin board and post what you were looking for. And it was wonderful. I had got so many responses so quickly, interviewed tons of these students. And the one that really stood out was a guy, Tianqi Chen. I call him TQ. He's from China. He now lives in New York. And he was an award-winning illustrator. And once I saw his work, I knew this was the person for it. And not only that, we got along well on the phone, told him my idea, and he sent back a sketch of what he saw. And that's was the, that alignment between me giving him a summary and him coming back with an illustration or a sketch, and you're going, he gets it.
Mm-hmm.
He absolutely gets it. With some of the other people, they were not as pinpointed as TQ was. So that started the relationship between myself and TQ, where we would discuss, what I wanted, and I gave him the freedom to bring his personality into those illustrations, because that's what he does. And as a former gallery owner, you meet artists and you don't want to be the person who is trying to dictate what they should or shouldn't do. Art is about freedom. Art is about people expressing themselves through different mediums, whether it be mixed media, music, poetry, books. You want to hear what they have to say. However, any one of those mediums does need that editing to it. So, he'll send me something and I'll say, hey, TQ, maybe we need to, pull back on that, illuminate something else. And it just worked beautifully. To be quite honest, we didn't have much of a back and forth in terms of me disagreeing with the direction that he was going into. So it led to a beautiful relationship in us getting this project moving forward.
You mentioned that you owned a gallery in Madrid. You also have an extensive background in the music business. How do you think that background in art and music informs your writing?
So I think, and it's my personal opinion, that creatives, whatever they do, even if they're setting a table for guests for a meal, you could see how the table placement is and the colors that the napkins, and how they position the forks, the way they lay the food on the plate. That's what creatives do. It bleeds into other parts of your life. And I think for myself, being a part of projects with my partner, Mikey Basie, working with Sly and Robbie, legendary Sly and Robbie, you start to subconsciously reach back for things that you have learned in the past, and it bleeds into my writing. I find that I'm a very vivid person in telling a story. So once I was writing it, it almost felt like I was writing a movie or anime or something like that. I could see it vividly coming forward, and then trying to put that vivid pictures in my mind into words. And how do I express myself that the reader sees it somewhat the way that I see it, or they could start to imagine it themselves. And one of the examples I would use is one of the mediums that I find to be one of the few mediums that I find to be great is songs, where an individual could write a song about something that's going on with their life, or even if it's not something that's going on with their life, but it resonates with the listener, where you start to take on that song and give it a different meaning because it means something different for you. So if you listen to one of Bob Marley's songs about equal rights or love, you start to incorporate those lyrics into your own life. You start, if you're dancing with your partner, it means something different to you. And that's what I love about how my previous life being around creatives, doing creative things kind of bled into this particular project. As a first-time writer, you do have that, imposter feeling of, am I going to be doing justice doing this? And although it was just meant for one person initially, which was my son, he's an avid reader. He has very deep conversations as a kid. So, you just can't present him with something that's not done properly. So I just hope that my ability to see things, hear the beauty in music would actually bleed out into this project.
There are also a lot of musical references in the book, references to Jamaican culture. Why was it important to you to include those references?
Well, first and foremost, I love music. It started with my mom and her record player when I was in Jamaica, the Al Green records, the Bob Marley records, the ABBA records. So, and she allowed me to play with her record player at an early age in 8 tracks and stuff like that. So I'm dating myself now. So, music has always been a part of my life. And subsequently, with my partner, Mikey, we run Hookshop Records where we create songs. We work with other people. Mikey worked with Britney Spears and other huge artists. So music has always been something that I'm attached to. I write songs myself. So I wanted to, my son, I'm Jamaican. His mother is Irish. But I'm writing this book. So I want to selfishly put parts of this book that speaks to the Jamaican culture and things that I like and music that I like. So I referenced a lot of music that I like so I could spark curiosity in the reader and that they could go and investigate what these songs, who these artists are, who are great artists and music that I think will stand the test of time. And I've had situations where I'm in the car with my son and I put on, artists that he has never heard about before and he's not privy to, and look for a reaction. And the greatest reaction is when he wants to play another song that they do, or we start to talk about, and there he goes by me.
Hey.
And we start to talk about the meaning of a song. So again, I think, music is one of the mediums where globally, even if someone doesn't understand fully the lyrics, it will speak to people either through the movement, the lyrics, the melody. It's just awesome. It's the one medium that I could put my finger on that just transcends borders. So it was very important for me to make some musical references inside there. And they're not all Jamaican musicians. Like I say, my musical taste is very wide, and so is his. So, for the readers of this book, that'd be great. The young readers of this book, I should say.
It's incredibly exciting. The story is very exciting. It's also very funny. There are parts that are very funny. Was that sort of an intentional choice that you were making when you were writing to include the humor, or is that just naturally flowing for you?
Listen, I think we all would like to think that we're funny human beings. At least Dave Chappelle does and Chris Rock, but I'd be lying if I told you yes. However, there in the back of my mind, I settle on there are stories or scenes that I want to tell, and I hopefully the reader could see the humor in them.
Mhm.
So instead of trying to be intentionally, how can I be funny? Because I'm not a comedian and I wouldn't know the basis of telling a joke or how to construct a joke. But everyone has told a story that is funny. They're not a comedian, but they have a story that has some wit to it. And that's what I ended up on. Let's try and tell like these scenes or scenarios that have some humor in it. And I am pleasantly surprised, and I should say happy, that you found the humor in the book. And also my son and some of the readers found the humor in the book. So I did not intentionally seek out to be funny in telling parts of the story. It's just constructing scenes and parts of the story that I felt had some humor to it, but you never know someone.
Yeah.
It will fall flat. And when you tell it.
What does your son Brooklyn think about the book and the fact that it's now maybe going to be more
Well,
widely published?
I introduced the book to him on his birthday. I had it wrapped. I had it printed, a printed version of it sent to me, and I loved it. Wrapped it up. He opened it up, and if I could just kind of rewind back when I was getting the illustration done, TQ, I sent him references of what I wanted the characters to look like. So the main character, Brooklyn, is based off my son. And so the cover of the book, when he opened it, he saw himself as a main character. He saw, what I looked like on the book. So that sparked huge reaction from him. And then after he read the book, he came out and gave me a huge hug and said he really, really liked the book. He really liked the book. And he introduced it to some of his friends, and his grandma ultimately read the book, and his mom read the book. So for him, to be quite honest, the only person that I cared about response was his, if I'm being totally honest, because the genesis of doing this book was for him,
Mhm.
and it flowed from his idea of trying to do a video game about a kid that teleports.
Is
And
it
he asked me about what's his cut on the book.
Well, what is
And
it?
to be discussed.
Is there a book that you remember reading at his age that stuck with you?
Absolutely. The Pearl. Um, I got that book to read for a lit class around his age. And, I wasn't an avid reader as my son is at this age.
Mhm.
His reading is off the charts. He's reading, Isaac Newton's book. He's out there, and
Mhm.
he's not your typical reader. He does Trevor Noah's book. He does novels, biographies, science books. He'll take up your occasional physics book to try and see if he could figure stuff out.
Wow.
But for myself, I was more a reader of, at his age, I was a huge comic book reader, massive comic book reader. I used to collect comics and I love to write articles. And part of that newspaper is because my mom was the one who would get the Sunday paper and have me read it from the front to the back. And I'm talking about the large one you get on Sundays.
Mhm.
And not only did I have to read it, but I would have to explain what I was reading. So when I was given the Pearl, well, my class, the Pearl to read, I just love how that book flowed, the old man in that book and how it was talking about his feelings and all that stuff. It just really resonated with me. And mostly because not only did we have to read it, but we had to write an essay just giving our perspective on what the book
Mhm.
meant to us and what we understood. So to this day, I still remember that book because it was just, although it wasn't a book that I just naturally gravitated to, it was one
Mhm.
that was pushed upon me, but it was that fire or that catalyst that started me, okay, let's start looking at what other books that are out there. So that led into your, all right, Shakespeare. Let's start reading some Shakespeare and stuff like that. So The Pearl is where it all started for me.
This is your first book that you've written.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Do you think you've always been a writer, though, in some way?
I believe so. But there are people out here that do this as a professional, whether they're writing for the Washington Post, some sort of publication, they write scripts, they read, there are real
Mhm.
professionals out here who go to school to do this. So considering myself a writer of a book is a far stretch. But what I believed about myself is that I had those intangibles that laid dormant in you,
Mhm.
that once I started to write, it started to flow. And the reason I say that is that, if I start thinking about my school years, I always did well in my literature classes. That's where I generally had and history,
Mhm.
my best grades. And I was able to quickly write short stories in the past. Occasionally, I write poems.
So
So
you were writing.
I was writing, but again, that feeling of that imposter
Mhm.
complex
Yeah.
rolls in because when you do read um, someone who does it well, you realize there is a separation between yourself and someone who does it really, really well. So I'll give you an example. I believe that, you hear people like to use the word eloquent. He speaks eloquent. I think there are a few people in this world that you could lay that label on,
Mm.
that they have the ability to lay down their thoughts about a subject matter or about a story that they have or a poem that they've written,
Mhm.
that it resonates so well with a mass audience that it sparks conversations decades later.
Mm.
It's
Mhm.
still the focal point of a dinner discussion
Mhm.
anywhere you go. And when I hear people throw around, that kind of word sometimes, and they like to throw around the word genius with people, I go, slow down,
Mhm. Mhm.
slow down, and I think when you talk about Frost, Maya Angelou, Toni Morrison, writers like that, you start to go like, okay, there is a level that not many people will get to, but it doesn't mean that for individuals like myself, who's a first-time book author, should not try and do the things that we're striving to.
Yeah. What do you know now that you wish you had known when you started this process?
That's a very good question. And quite a few things. The I would say tongue in cheek, how hard it is to sell a book, because there are different facets that go along with that. The marketing, and marketing costs money. How do you get to one of these publishing agencies? How do you get an agent to represent you? And then on the more serious side is, how do you get better?
Mm-hmm.
So I tend to look at conversations between characters and how that flows.
Mm-hmm.
And generally, when I see a movie or read a book or a story, short story, a lot of those conversations are not mimicking what generally happens in real life. So for instance, this conversation we're having, Kelley, you'll ask me a question and I go off on a tangent on something else. And that's just how the human brain works.
Right.
We are asked a question and we might stay in context for a minute or two, but then we diverge to somewhere else and then somehow try and work our way back to, what did you ask me again? So there are writers out there that do it very well in the way how they manage conversations between characters and how that kind of teeter off into something else. And that's what I think I will aim to incorporate in the next series of the book, the next book in this series, I should say. And I think thirdly is, now that I've completed this first book, is to stay true to the ones that are doing this really professionally, because ultimately I would like to be part of this community of writers, and one that is regarded at some point as, Sean actually has something. He's no James Baldwin, but he's, you know, he's up and coming, or he has something there that readers would want to read. And you know, what I love about, you know, the arts is that there is a wide audience out there that you could cater to. And you know, some people, they love the very intricate noir detective projects. Some people love your Mills and Boons type romantic. You know, you can read on the subway, and even if you miss a few pages, you won't get, you know, they get lost in that. And some people love your biographies or autobiographies. And I am trying to find a lane that I think that I could be good at, which is expanding on this world of Brooklyn and the things that kids go through that will be, it resonates with the reader, you know? So the book is coming from the perspective of the main character, Brooklyn. So in writing the book, I have to hark back to when I was a kid, some of the things that I liked or disliked, and try and put that into the book. And some of the things I learned as a father that my own son tells me, hey, Dad, that was not cool. You know what I mean? You need to work on that, or you need to get better at that. And I try to incorporate that. So I think in the next book, I'm going to make a valid effort to try and speak more about things that would resonate with these kids that they encounter in school, in their everyday life, that they're like, oh, I understand this. This looks like me. This sounds like me. Brooklyn, I resonate with Brooklyn, and I know what he's talking about.
Have you already started the next one?
I've done the outline. I haven't put pen to paper, so to speak, yet. I'm in the process of outlining how I think the book should kind of flow, and then I'll just start getting into the writing.
And there's a series planned?
I think of this as a trilogy so far. And I kind of mapped out what that trilogy will look like. And then we'll see where it goes from there. I think a lot of this depends on the response I get, whether it's a good or bad response. And if I'm really good at being an independently published writer, and I mean, it all depends on, can I move product? And if I can move product, then, you could reinvest the money into doing much more. Or if by some reason, a publisher who's watching this is interested and wants to have a chat, then we'll see how that goes.
Where can people find the book?
So people could find the book at telekidbegins.com. But let me give a caveat on that right now, is that the book is available in digital form, so to speak. So I've pulled the site down and I'm making some revisions to it. So please don't freak out if you don't see the book there. And it will be available pretty soon. I'm just having my web guy do some changes. And that's what I'm doing. I'm self-publishing this. I'm doing it digitally and see what the responses is, because I see a lot of kids now that they're reading books via their iPads or their phones, but I do love the idea of a actual hard copy book.
You
have
hold it up again one more time, Sean, because the cover looks great. Yeah, it's great.
So yeah, that's where you can find the book.
Traditional last question that we have on this podcast. When TeleKid Begins is made into a movie or series, what do you think the theme song should be?
Oh, I already know. It's called I Can Fly by Hookshop. And Hookshop is myself and Mikey Basie and John Henry, which is his son. This is a song my partner wrote for a friend of ours who passed. His name is Bob Andy, who's regarded as one of the best songwriters that ever lived in Jamaica. And I reference lyrics to the song in actually TeleKids. Again, I believe that, songs are one of the few mediums and lyrics, poems that could reach out and grab an audience and, intertwine itself into their lives and give it new meaning. So if, a singer is singing a concert or this particular song, or Here I Can Fly as the opening credits to a movie, it means something to it, something different to everyone. And that's what I like about it. And that's the song that I would like if it should be made into a movie.
When it's made into a movie.
Well, from your lips to people at the studios and CAA and all the other big agencies that are out there.
Sean Scott, thank you so much for coming on today. It has been wonderful getting the chance to talk to you.
Well, absolutely. Kelley Vick, I've known you for a very long time, and I wish you all the best in this venture. And I want to thank you for inviting me. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, and wishing you all the best.
Thanks for joining us on Literary Prospects. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe and leave us a review. We'll see you next time.